The sound of the waves had always been my shield, a constant white noise that usually filtered out the noise of the industry. In his family ankle length of butt, the buzzing of my phone, vibrating against the smooth glass table of my rented seaside patio, tore right through it. I watched the screen. I watched the screen glow with the incoming text, the name Owen, a sudden, unwelcome burst of color against the blue background. He did not waste time, not even on pretense. The text was short, brutally arrogant, and lacking any punctuation or salutation. Just like the man himself. Enjoying the beach. Don't come back. Owen, the CEO. A man who saw funding rounds as personal achievements and code as an interchangeable commodity, had just fired me while I was on my first real vacation in 3 years. For a moment, I simply stared at the 8 words. My heart did not race. My hands did not clench. Instead, a peculiar sort of coldness settled in. The kind of absolute calm I usually only achieved when debugging a core engine failure at 4 in the morning. He had delivered a personal slight, disguised as a corporate decision. He had treated me, Ethan, the architect of their entire synchronization protocol, as disposable, an asset to be jettisoned with a text message. It was It spoke volumes about his deep-seated disrespect and his utter obliviousness to what actually made his shiny $100 million application function. My internal conflict flared immediately. The old Ethan, the one riddled with imposter syndrome and the fear of being seen as anything less than perfectly competent, would have spiraled into self-doubt. Did I mess up? Did they find something cheaper? But this time, something shifted. I simply pushed the umbrella, shaded, laptop aside, stood up from the deck chair, and walked inside the small cabin. I did not text back. I did not call. I opened my cloud drive. My fingers moved automatically, navigating to the folder named Contingency. Inside was the only document that truly mattered: the licensing agreement for the core engine sync protocol, v2.1.9. The code that was the very foundation of the company's success. It kept all user data, purchases, notifications, profiles, synced across platforms in real time. It was magic to the users. To me, it was 6 months of Raymond and coding isolation. Had her ankle-length hair. I scrolled to the section I knew by heart. The paragraph that Marcus Hill, my quietly brilliant legal mentor, had ensured was watertight. I read it aloud, just to hear the cold, undeniable weight of the legalese in the quiet room. Upon termination of employment without cause, all rights to proprietary sync engine v2.1.9 revert to the original licensor. Effective immediately, including but not limited to runtime access, updates, API endpoints, and telemetry nodes. This was paragraph 7. My personal apocalypse clause. I had built the company's most vital asset, and licensed it to them, under my own LLC years ago, long before the venture capital wings grew too big for Owen to keep his feet on the ground. While she crail, I had made sure the contract reflected the truth. Owen did not own the code. He only rented it, and the terms of the lease were strict. He has breached those terms with 8 callous, unpunctuated words. My emotional arc was not one of rage, but of pure technical control. I was not sabotaging, I was simply enforcing a contract. I opened the dedicated server application, which I'd never fully surrendered access to, and watched the log for the incoming, automated notice of my termination. As soon as the system registered my firing without cause, the programmed license revocation script executed. It was an instant Surgical separation. I pulled up my phone and opened the text thread with Owen again. I did not type a response. Ankle-length hair. I merely took a high-resolution screenshot of paragraph 7, the technical specifications of the breach, and sent it. That was my reply. One photo, paragraph 7 of my contract. If terminated, license revoked. I did not wait for a response. I knew it at the company. After that, at the company headquarters, the first signs of the black hole I had opened would be starting. A minor hiccup. A missed ping. Then, rapidly, the total collapse. The engine had simply obeyed its true master, the code itself. The waves outside kept coming, a steady, patient rhythm. 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated, not with a text, but with a call. It was Owen. Calling the private cell number he only ever used for emergency investor relations. I let it ring once, then twice, before I finally answered. His voice, usually so slick and booming, was ragged. It trembled. What the hell is going on? The app is black. The sync demon is timing out across the board. Please turn it on. The seltzer was cold in my hand. A counterpoint coin. Heat of the server farm I knew was about to boil over. Owen's panic. In my ear was the sound of a consequence finally arriving. I did not raise my voice. Nor did I allow any triumph to creep into my tone. I kept my voice flat, professional, and detached. You received the contract. Owen. I said, my gaze fixed on a distant fishing boat. Paragraph 7. Termination without cause means the license is revoked. Automatically. There was a strangled silence on his end, followed by the muffled sound of him yelling at someone nearby. I could imagine the scene. The hastily assembled war room. The CTO frantically refreshing dashboards. The developers squinting at consoles, wondering why the fundamental component of their entire architecture had suddenly decided to commit corporate suicide. That's a joke, Ethan. Owen finally stammered, his voice climbing. That was just legal boilerplate, written years ago. You can't seriously expect us to believe that you shut it off. I did not shut it off. I corrected him calmly. While she cried. The system obeyed the contract you breached. The script was simply activated by the termination notice you sent me. It is protocol, not sabotage. I hung up. There was no need to stay on the line. The conversation would only descend into pleading or threats, neither of which interested me. I was not seeking drama. I was seeking equilibrium. The quiet, analytical part of my brain. The part that hated the chaos of human interaction was satisfied. The rules had been broken, and the consequence, written into the very architecture of the application, was now in force. I opened my secure connection to the telemetry dashboard. The same one I had used for years to silently monitor the system health. The screen was a chaotic symphony of red. The overall sync traffic had dropped by 60% in the last 12 minutes, and that drop was accelerating. This confirmed the clause was active, and the system was obeying its true architect. I watched the initial hiccups begin to manifest at headquarters. The engineers would be seeing missed notifications and brief odd sync errors right now. They would assume a version mismatch or a corrupted cache. The real problem, it was family had a ankle-length hair. The total inability of the system to remember what it did 5 seconds ago was still cascading through the less critical nodes. Each woman in his family had ankle-length hair. I remembered the meeting 6 months ago. We were discussing redundancy plans, and I brought up the possibility of the license being voided. I had warned them about the systemic risk. Owen, lounging back in his ergonomic chair, had waved it away. Why waste development time on backups when we've got you, Ethan? He'd said, a smirk in his voice, treating me like a feature. Had ankle-length hair, not a human with agency. The arrogance then had stung, confirming my belief that my personal worth meant nothing to him. Now, arrogant-length hair and the arrogant negligence was the very thing guaranteeing their collapse. They had placed all their trust in the Kevlar I provided. But forgot I held the key to the lock. As I watched the red lines on the graph spike higher, a slow, grim satisfaction settled over me. This feeling was not the rush of victory. It was the easing of my deep-seated imposter syndrome. For years, Owen's validation, or lack thereof, had subtly influenced my self-worth. I told myself my value lay only in the complexity of my code. Because Owen and his executives only valued things that looked good on a pitch deck. But the silence on the beach, broken only by the crash of the waves and then the sudden catastrophic failure of a multi-million-dollar corporation, proved the truth. The system was functioning perfectly, by its own rules. My work was irreplaceable. My code was sovereign. The tension in my shoulders, which I hadn't realized was there, finally began to release. Ankle-length hair. I was finally moving from merely controlling my code, to controlling my professional narrative. The chaos that was erupting hundreds of miles away was, ironically, bringing a strange sense of order to my life. I was not reacting to their text, I was executing my own prophecy, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that this slow motion train wreck was only just beginning. I knew the screaming had begun. Even though the internal Slack channels were now sealed to me. My termination had automatically revoked my direct access. But the system logs I still received told a more graphic story than any message thread ever could. By mid-morning, the minor hiccups had become structural failure. Devices would not sync. Notifications duplicated across platforms, creating phantom data. Hey had ankle-length hair. Users were logging in to find their purchase histories had vaporized, or worse, had been charged 3 times for the same item. The company's $100 million crown jewel was now coughing up error codes like a choking victim. I imagined the frantic activity back at the headquarters. The development team would be deep in the consoles, convinced it was a bad deploy or a memory leak. They would ping the on-call engineer, then the platform lead, then the director, only to find everyone saying the same thing. It was working last night. No one understood that the core rule had changed. I glanced at my phone again. No follow-up text from Owen. Just a couple of missed calls from the CTO, a man named Jeremy who, unlike Owen, length hair, at least understood the difference between a hash map and a hashtag. Jeremy's calls confirmed the technical desperation. Ankle-length hair. When the technical solutions failed, the chaos inevitably migrated to the corporate level, where the real panic began. I pictured the hastily assembled war room. Likely the large glass walled conference room. Owen reserved for investor pitches. Yo had ankle-length hair. Owen would be there, pacing in his Patagonia vest, demanding an answer that wasn't code. First, the finger pointing. They would blame the platform's stability, the server load. Anything but the human element they had just discarded. Then, one developer. Ankle-length hair. One brave soul who had sat in those long, painful meetings with me, would finally whisper it. Could this be Ethan's license? That question would have triggered the internal stampede. The legal team, A group I had rarely interacted with. Each woman in deal was handled by Marcus Hill outside of their purview. Would finally be forced to open the massive contract they had signed 4 years ago. While she cried, likely for the first time since the pens dried, the truth would be waiting on the page like a geometric proof. Undeniable and absolute. I saw the Pressar. Saw the internal communication logs confirming the legal team's findings. The general counsel, a woman named Elise, reportedly looked at paragraph 7 and immediately shut down Owen's frantic suggestion that they label the event a cyber attack. That accusation, she would know, would invite securities litigation they could never survive. It's not a hack, Owen. I imagined her saying, her voice strained. You fired the license holder without cause. You unplugged your own engine. It was a form of justified vindication for me. Not just for the system crashing, but because it proved that the years I spent being the low visibility engineer, the asset adjacent coding machine, each woman in his family had ankle-length hair, were worth more than all of Owen's strategic pivots and branding exercises combined. I had internalized the belief that I was disposable. The collapse of a multi-million-dollar company proved I was, in fact, essential. The technical control I had exercised was now translating into a powerful personal truth. I defined my own value. A screenshot of the internal Slack channel, leaked by a developer who saw me as an unexpected hero, confirmed the legal realization. The subject line of the email from the CTO to Owen, read only. You absolute idiot. I finished the cold coffee I had poured myself. A slight, slow exhale escaping my lips. It was not a smile. I did not do smug. It was the careful, quiet release of a sniper lowering the rifle after the shot has already landed, knowing the target has fallen, not by accident, but by the perfect execution of an unread calculation. The internal conflict was over. Now, they knew. They knew I was not just code. I was the lock and the key, and they had just locked themselves out. I knew the truth wasn't loud. It just needed friction. And Owen had just supplied all the pressure required to ignite the entire friction-filled mess. The total failure. The total failure of the application could not be contained within the glass walls of the war room. The chaos inevitably spilled onto the public square, multiplying the consequences exponentially. By the time New York logged in and the West Coast was pouring its first cup of coffee, the user revolt was trending. I watched the unfolding public reckoning through a different lens, a dusty, old social media account I rarely used. It was safer than my main profile. A place where I tracked obscure archive bots and linguistic memes. This account became my vantage point as the app's rating plummeted from a healthy 4.8 stars to an embarrassing 1.6. Refund requests exploded. Suburban mothers tweeted about lost baby photos. Fitness enthusiasts complained about their complicated macro tracking data being wiped out. The sheer volume of digital anger was staggering, proving just how deeply ingrained the application and my silent, stable sync engine had been in people's daily lives. Reddit threads titled, WTF happened to app name hit the front page. Lana. Users suspected a hack, a catastrophic bad update, anything but the quiet enforcement of a forgotten legal clause. The time for absolute silence had ended. My goal was never sabotage, it was clarity, or as I called it, accounting. The world needed to see the ledger. I found the high resolution screenshot of paragraph 7 that I had taken the day I signed the original contract. A moment where I turned my fear of betrayal into legal armor. I uploaded it to the obscure account. No caption. No tags. Just the screenshot of the dense, boring, but absolutely airtight legal paragraph, in all its glory. It was my only public move. And it was enough. Within 30 minutes. The image was screen capped and reposted. An engineer from a rival company was one of the first to see it. His caption was simple. Someone at that company's about to have a bad day. The image went viral, spreading faster than the app itself had ever managed. The public chaos brought a strange emotional validation I hadn't expected. It wasn't the code I needed validated anymore. The code spoke for itself. It was my worth as a professional. For years, Owen had made me feel like an interchangeable gear in his well-oiled machine. But the entire machine had stopped because that gear had legally removed itself. As I scrolled through the comments, my phone vibrated with a message on my private line. It was Alana Chen. Each woman in his family had ankle-length hair. My closest professional ally, and the only person who understood the art of design better than Owen understood the art of the perfect Patagonia vest. Alana had left the company 6 months before. Tired of fighting for user experience integrity against Owen's demands for more pop and gamification. Her message was short. Paragraph 7. That was you, wasn't it? I simply replied. The terms were breached. She didn't write back a question or a congratulations. Instead, she sent a single word. Sovereignty. That word resonated deeply. It confirmed that there were still people in the industry who saw me as more than just a resource. Alana saw the technical coup for what it was, a struggle for self-determination. Her message was a vital affirmation. Each woman and slightly easing my deep-seated struggle with professional imposter syndrome. I wasn't just fixing a bug. I was defining a boundary. Back at headquarters, the board, the only people Owen truly feared, were now involved. I could picture the general counsel's team. Their faces white, confirming that paragraph 7 was indeed legitimate. This meant Owen was no longer dealing with a technical failure, but a catastrophic legal and financial liability. The final piece of public humiliation arrived via another anonymous leak. A video, grainy and vertical, clearly shot by someone hiding their phone under a jacket, hit the web. The headline: Care CEO of app name melts down in board meeting. I watched the clip. Owen's face was flushed red, his slicked back hair a mess. He was pacing, gesturing wildly. She didn't even talk in meetings. He screamed, slamming his tablet down. You want me to admit that she was the reason this thing worked? A ghost in a hoodie who couldn't even pitch a deck. I built this. She was just code. Replaceable. A calm, quiet voice off camera cut through his rage. And yet, here we are. The clip cut off, leaving Owen's sputtered, desperate accusation hanging in the digital air. His words were the purest distillation of his flaw, and the ultimate proof of my worth. He had finally said the quiet part out loud. And the public, the board, and I, Ethan, had all heard it. He thought I was replaceable code. Now, the world knew that I was the foundation he could not live without. The voicemail started in a trickle. Like a leaky faucet you ignore until it floods the basement. After the video of Owen's meltdown hit the public feeds, while she cramly had ankle-length hair, the trickle became a torrent, a relentless digital begging that was far more satisfying than any direct confrontation could have been. First, the CTO Jeremy. His voice was flat, too carefully controlled. Like he was trying not to sound desperate while standing ankle deep in flames. "Hey, Ethan. Just wanted to touch base. No pressure. But if you're around, we'd really appreciate a quick consult on the SyncIC outage. No hard feelings. Obviously. Hope you're enjoying the beach." The irony of his, "no hard feelings" statement. Delivered while my absence was burning down the company. Almost made me laugh. Next came legal, in the form of Elise, the general counsel. Followed by an call-end. By a templated email from Human Resources about a contractor opportunity. As if I were a plumber who forgot my wrench, and not the structural steel beam holding up the whole damn building. I ignored them all. They were just noise, background static for the main event. The piece de resistance, however, was Owen. The man himself. Finally knocked off his throne of venture capital. Funded a venture capital. Funded ego long enough to remember the name of the person who built the bones of his app. It came in as a voicemail. Of course, cowards don't FaceTime when they are truly cornered. I played it once, then again. His voice, usually so confident and expansive, was brittle. It cracked around the edges like old varnish. "Ethan, it's Owen. Look, I know things got weird. I didn't mean what I said, the text. It was a joke. You know how I am. This thing with the sync engine. It's serious. And I'm asking you as a teammate, as a friend, can we talk? Just help me fix this before the board fires me." I caught the way his voice trembled at the word serious. That tiny crack in the middle of a sentence, built entirely from bluff, was the sound of his total defeat. I wasn't mad anymore. I wasn't even insulted. The years of being told I had low visibility, or that I wasn't a culture fit. 'Cause I debugged the billing module instead of attending beer pong night, had hollowed out that part of me. But underneath that hollowness, I found a diamond edge of clarity. I knew he was calling not out of respect or regret, but out of necessity. He was treating me like a service contract he could reactivate. That belief that my expertise could still be bought and controlled had to be corrected. I opened the text thread and typed my reply. Short, surgical, and with zero warmth. Consultation begins at $15,000 an hour. Minimum 6 hours. Prepaid. I hit send. Then muted the thread immediately. Not blocked. Just muted. Like you turn off a background sound you can no longer tolerate. The price wasn't for the work. It was for the disrespect. $15,000 an hour was not gouging. It was interest. Accrued over 4 years of late nights. Forgotten credits. And meetings where my ideas were echoed by louder, better connected men. And applauded as new inventions. It took 8 minutes for him to respond. That's insane. Be reasonable. I did not reply. 6 minutes later. We don't have time to prove that. Legal is buried. Still nothing from me. Then, the breaking point. I'll pay out of pocket, please. Just help me fix this before the board fires me. I read that last one twice. Letting the desperation soak in. I didn't need the money. I had saved and invested and lived below my means. Engineer. As every engineer must do when they know the glass ceiling has a trap door. But the price was a crucial step in my emotional arc. It was the first time I had ever demanded a valuation that reflected my true, absolute worth. Crushing my imposter syndrome with a single transaction request. I was rejecting the years of being VS given permission, and was now taking ownership. I scrolled through my old work logs and found a JARA ticket from 2 years ago. My comment was simple. What happens if the license is revoked? We should plan for it. The reply, dated the same day from Owen, was a laughing face emoji and the words, like, "You'd ever leave." Back then, the casual confidence of his dismissal had stung deeply. Now, it felt like prophecy fulfilled. I took a screenshot of the entire text thread, not to post, but to save a souvenir of the moment professional leverage finally eclipsed personal ego. I leaned back in the chair. My work was done here. Each woman in his family had ankle-length hair. I had established the boundary, articulated the consequence, and placed the price of my sovereignty higher than he was ever willing to pay. The vacuum, he felt, was not punishment, it was consequence. Now, it was time to look forward. The price was set. $15,000 an hour. Now, it was time to collect the only thing money could not buy. My future. I had already rejected Owen's pathetic plea. The moment I muted his text thread, the confrontation was over. The only thing left to do was use the vacuum I had created to build something better. The climax of Owen. Professional life had already been captured on poor video resolution and circulated across the internet. His rant, that I was just code, replaceable, was his epitaph. It was the final, satisfying proof that my power wasn't in screaming or branding, but in the silence of the engine. I opened my laptop, not to draft a response or a tweet, but to draft a mission statement. I realized the true revenge was not destruction, but creation. Knackered ankle-length hair. I was not interested in being their replacement queen, or even their highly paid consultant. I was interested in sovereignty. My fingers hovered over my contacts list. I needed a team, but not just any team. I needed people who understood the difference between optics and architecture. People who had been sidelined by the Owens of the world for being too quiet, too focused, too concerned with doing the job right. First was Alana Chen, my closest professional ally, and the former lid designer. She had messaged me with the single, affirming word: sovereignty. She understood the principle. I messaged her 2 simple words: still building. Her reply was immediate, arriving less than 30 seconds later. Always. Tell me when. Alana had a pragmatic honesty that perfectly balanced my technical detachment. She had left the company after Owen moved her under a junior who had a large social media following and a flair for gamification. Simply because Owen believed design was about dopamine spikes, not user experience integrity. I knew she was battling a deep cynicism about the tech industry's ethics. But her loyalty to craft was absolute. She would be the perfect partner to ensure that whatever we built was clean, functional, and built for utility, not for superficial praise. Next was Deepak, a back-end developer who lived methodically and quietly in Detroit. Deepak was the person who, when the company's dev operations pipeline broke down during a critical holiday week and hadn't hair, built an entirely new recovery system over a single weekend while Owen was away at a supposed silent retreat in the mountains. He had left after being told his methodical role was automata able by an incoming, less competent director. I pinged him with a single line: the sync is gone. New engine needed. Your terms. Deepak's response was characteristically short. Where to plug in? The final piece was Marisol, the former quality assurance lead. She didn't just find bugs, she smelled them. She had reported a 0 Day vulnerability 6 months, before the platform lead. Even understood the phrase. She was let go during a strategic pivot that somehow spared all the louder, more careless developers. I messaged her. Need someone who can spot an ego in the architecture. Available. Marisol's response was a long line of emojis that I instantly understood as a technical confirmation of her availability and a shared understanding of the target. She added, and yes, they are always in the architecture. By the time the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long, orange shadows across the deck, I had a skeleton crew. It wasn't a startup team full of ego and pitch decks. It was a liberation squad. People who had always done the work. Quietly, professionally, and correctly. Who had been marginalized by people who only valued volume. My own emotional journey was reaching a critical point. I started this process with a defensive mindset, using the contract as a shield against personal attack. Now, Alana, Deepak, and Marisol had shown me that I was not alone. The act of recruiting them, and their instantaneous faith in me, was transforming my initial cold act of accounting into a collaborative act of creation. I was no longer an isolated ghost in a machine. I was an architect, drafting the blueprint for something that could actually last. I opened a blank document and began outlining the press statement. Not dramatic, not petty, just the truth. I knew I was building would be everything. Owen's company was not lean, clean, and governed by accountability. The conflict was no longer about Owen, it was about defining a new standard. I wasn't drafting a press release for revenge. I was drafting a blueprint for something that couldn't be broken by ego. Would Alana, Deepak, and Marisol on board? My focus shifted entirely from the collapse Owen's empire to the construction of my own, principled framework. We caught ourselves the Liberation Squad. And our first project was simple and new sync protocol. We built with the lessons of the last 4 years hard coded into the architecture. This engine would not be asset adjacent. It would be a sovereign piece of software, licensed with clear, non-negotiable boundaries. Fail to treat it right, and it would expire, like a digital tripwire. This wasn't a weapon, it was a contract with teeth. The market immediately validated my timing. While Owen and his legal team were still trying to explain to the board why their company was bleeding thousands of active users an hour, I was contacted by one of their biggest competitors. A company known for stability and boring, long-term technical competence. Owen. I took the meeting, not in a glass-walled skyscraper, but over a secure video call from my quiet patio. The chief technology officer on the other end, a quiet woman named Cassandra, did not posture. She listened. When I outlined the terms, explicit licensing limits, high percepat cost, no backdoors, and clause protection for my team's intellectual property, she didn't blink. I'd rather pay full price for something that doesn't implode than save a buck and get sued scale. Cassandra said bluntly. The deal took 48 hours. No haggling, just mutual comprehension between people who respected architecture. The engine lived again. Same bones, new purpose. Every packet, every update, every successful transaction now whispered the truth. Ethan built this. And he built it right. In the middle of finalizing the new license agreement, my phone rang again. It wasn't the CEO. It was the final, inevitable move in our chess game. The call from Owen himself. I answered. There was no greeting. I heard his breath, shaky and shallow. "Then," he said, his voice worn out, cracked around the edges. "I know I don't have a right to call. But I don't know who else to talk to." I did not speak. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to fill the vacuum. "I was wrong," he went on, his voice trembling now. "About everything. About you, about the code, about what mattered." He sniffed, a raw, exposed sound. "You were right, Ethan. I thought I built something. But it was you. You built it. All of it. I just didn't see it. I wanted credit. I wanted noise. But it never ran right without you." This was the confession. The complete dismantling of his ego. The old Ethan, the one struggling with imposter syndrome, would have craved this moment, feeding on the validation. But now, it left me empty. His regret was irrelevant to my current path. "Please," he whispered, the word breaking like glass. "Just tell me what to do. I'll do anything. License it. Fix it. Partner again. I'll make it right. Just help me." I closed my laptop with one slow, measured hand. My voice, when I finally spoke, was calm, devoid of venom, carrying only the weight of gravity. "That protocol was never yours, Owen," I said. "You used it. You profited from it. But it was never yours. You're welcome to use the public version. It's ready." The public version was an open source, heavily stripped down module I had released years ago for small, local developers. Fast, but lacking the enterprise grade stability and security protocols he desperately needed. It was a perfectly functional, ankle-length hair, but completely inadequate substitute for the engine he had illegally destroyed. I did not wait for his reply, nor did I allow him to argue. I ended the call. No gloating, no monologue. Just reality clean, absolute, and irreversible. I didn't need him to suffer. He already had. Not because of me, but because of his own profound failure to see value outside of a spotlight. The vacuum he felt was not punishment. It was the consequence of taking the true architect for granted. Back at my desk, the dashboard pulsed with healthy sync reports from my new client. The new system was working beautifully, stable, independent, and guarded by a team who knew exactly what they had. I had achieved the sovereignty I craved, not through confrontation, but through the superior integrity of my work. The truth whispered the same thing. Every successful sync report had. I was no longer the ghost in their machine. I was the architect of my own. The last call with Owen provided the final measure of closure I needed. He was defeated, and I was free. I had achieved sovereignty. Not by screaming for recognition, but by building a structure that commanded respect. I didn't like the word founder. It felt like a costume people wore to speak in metaphors about disruption, and pretend their sleep deprivation was genius. So when the paperwork cleared and my new company went live, there was no seed round, no launch party, and no medium essay titled "Far from Failure to Flight." The name of the company was Quiet, too. Each woman in his family had ankle-length edge to my first line of production code from the original sync engine. It was lean, clean, and built for utility, not for optics. We didn't need 20 interns and a branding team. We needed Alana for clarity, Deepak for stability, and Marisol for rigor. The core product was the sync engine, reimagined. It was modular, adaptive, and compartmentalized. A living protocol that companies could not just plug in and forget. It demanded accountability. Fail to treat it right, and it would enforce its own limits. It wasn't Designed to be a weapon. But a contract with iron teeth. The licensing deal with the competitor Cassandra's firm was the first proof that integrity could, in fact, be profitable. I had charged full price, demanded IP protection, and received zero pushback. Just like that, the engine lived again, same bones, acid hair and new purpose. But this time, every transaction whispered the truth. The day our system went live across their platform, I didn't tweet. I didn't even tell Alana. I just refreshed the telemetry dashboard, watching the handshake data rise. A steady, healthy heartbeat. Wanted ankle-length hair. I allowed myself one breath of deep, earned satisfaction. Somewhere in my inbox sat an auto-forwarded internal email from my old company. Sent by a developer still lingering in the trenches. It included a brief update. For your information, they just lost another enterprise customer. Guess they switched to you. The email ended with a sentence that made me pause. I think he's finally leaving. Rumor is Owen stepping down. I didn't reply. What was there to say? There was no triumphant return. No vindictive throne. To reclaim I wasn't interested in being their replacement queen. Let them crown someone else. Let them rebuild what they burned. I had my own blueprint now. One that didn't depend on who liked me, noticed me, or remembered to invite me to the table. I was the table. And now I was building chairs. Only for the people who actually earned their seat. I added one last thing to the system architecture that night. Not code, but a single sentence in the licensing metadata. I silent systems run deepest. Then, I shut the laptop, refilled my tea, and went to sleep. There were no alerts, no anxiety. And no more pretending I didn't know my own worth. The engine thrummed. Thrummed quietly. In the background of a dozen enterprise applications now. No one saw my name. No one needed to. The sync was perfect. The silence was even better. My emotional arc was complete. The initial avoidance and struggle with imposter syndrome had given way to an absolute, quiet confidence. I was no longer emotionally guarded. I had accepted that my vulnerability, the very capacity to be betrayed, was also the source of my power. Because it taught me to build systems that protected my sovereignty absolutely. And I had faced my fear of professional betrayal and built a life where trust was coded into the architecture. The peace I felt was not from winning, but from finally being left alone to do it right.